the co-host for today. I'm joined by my industry colleague Radhakrishnan Gopalakrishnan, Head of Technology at Litmus 7. So today we are going to talk about getting your e-commerce site ready for the holiday season and all the performance engineering that entails. This is a universal problem with online retailers, and which in year 2016 essentially means just about any retailer. And as you all know, we are in the third week of October, so not that far away from D-Day. So at Forrester, we have been researching this for quite some time, the changing nature of e-commerce, the performance engineering challenge of making your website blazing fast, and in fact, the very specific problem of getting your site ready for the holiday season. These are things we have been researching for at least 5 years. We are also very fortunate to have Radha, who's a veteran of many such performance engineering initiatives and a survivor of many holiday seasons. In fact, 15 or so. His first Oracle ATG implementation was back in 2002. He has been doing this since the early days of e-commerce, since the turn of the century. So I'll let Radha introduce himself.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. Hello everyone, myself Radhakrishnan, Head of Technology at Litmus 7. As Somak mentioned, I have been working in the omni-channel commerce space since last 15 years, implementing and supporting some of the world's largest e-commerce platforms. My experience spans across various technologies and leading e-commerce platforms like Oracle ATG, WebSphere Commerce, Hybris, Magento, etc. I have been part of many holiday readiness and execution projects for various customers, and as always, each holiday season presents a unique set of challenges and great learning. So it's great to be speaking with all of you today about this interesting topic and Litmus 7's experience of site performance and getting ready for holidays.
Great, thanks Radha. So before we get into the intricacies of how to tune performance at various layers of technology, we must spend a couple of minutes discussing what performance means in this day and age, and also how the holiday season itself is changing, and how that impacts the performance engineering problem, how it impacts the problem statement. So, needless to say, the stakes do not get any higher. The holiday season for retailers could account for, depending on which industry sector you're from, anything between 15% and 25% of sales. And we have also heard of the number going up as high as 40% of annual digital sales just from these 2 months. And believe you me that every component of your e-commerce technology stack will be stretched. There are a host of problems which only become apparent when you hit peak demand. When you have tens of thousands of orders per hour and people still need your site to respond in 2 seconds, you have a serious challenge. So in the last few years, we have seen some of the largest brands in the world, such as Target, Victoria's Secret, Boots, Tesco, Argos, PayPal, eBay. They have gone through performance degradation during the holiday season. There's obviously an immediate loss of sales if something catastrophic happens and your site is unavailable. But there's also a bigger reputational damage. You don't want that, and these are career-ending problems. Radha, let me turn to you. Share with us some of your experiences of the kind of peak traffic you have seen at various clients, and tell us about the problems you have seen crop up due to peak demand, problems not anticipated during normal times.
Right. So definitely, as I mentioned, holiday seasons are always, a very challenging time for the, IT professionals. Specifically, what are the challenges? Like, for example, ensuring IT systems supporting holiday readiness, sales performance to the best is always a challenge. Okay. Now, why is this a challenge? It is just the sheer volume increase that we see in terms of visitors and transactions, which makes it a very challenging problem. Just to give an example, for one of our customers who is a leader in the cosmetic retailing, the 2015 holiday peaks are something as follows. For example, the normal average number of orders per day was around 22,000 orders, but during holiday peaks, this number spiked up to close to around 200,000 orders. Now, in terms of the number of visitors per day, the normal average was around 900,000, but during the holiday peaks, this number was around 3.2 million. Now, with respect to the number of page views per day, the normal average was around 6.6 million, and during the holiday peaks, we have seen this number go up to 25 to 26 million. So this is a kind of spike in traffic and transactions that we experience during the peak seasons, which is in the magnitude of 5 to 6x than the normal volumes. Now, because of this, there are multiple issues we have seen from a technology perspective because of these spikes. But to the end consumer or the end customer, it manifests as typical problems like slowness in the website, longer time to complete the transactions, and in worst case, the site is not accessible. Right? So even with all these precautions in place, there can be instances where things can go wrong, and ability to fix and quickly recover and normalize the system performance is key to the preparedness.
Yeah. Let's focus on certain numbers that we have seen in the last few years. So this chart tracks the growth of online holiday retail sales. As you can see, between 2008 and 2015, we have had steady growth. Growth has slowed down a little bit, but at no time since 2009 did it ever fall below double digits. So if you are, those of you on the call today, if you're running a high-performance e-commerce business, you are likely to see similar growth this year. So we estimate that online sales amounted to $95 billion in 2015, and we expect it to grow in double digits this year as well. Right. So data is great. Let's look at some specific anecdotes. So we at Forrester, we speak with tens of thousands of customers representing every demographics every year. And what we hear consistently is that anecdotal observations agree with hard data. So people are increasingly moving to the online channel during the holiday season. They like the benefit of fewer crowds, and their brands are beginning to recognize this as well. Let me share a data point that's quite interesting. Ordinarily, about 10% of total retail in the US is online, is e-commerce. But in November and December, the percentage actually spikes up to 14%. So the online channel actually becomes more important during the holiday season. So now let's get to the heart of the problem, the problem statement that we are trying to address today, which is performance. Now, performance, as you would agree, is an ever-moving target. Its definition changes every year and every holiday season. Now, the median expectation in our times, in circa 2016, is around 2 seconds. And you will lose up to 57% of your audience after 3 seconds. And we are talking first content time. And about 2/3 or 66% of web and mobile users expect a full page load in 4 seconds. And the moment you go beyond the 6 to 7 second mark for full page load, half of your users are never coming back. Rather, why don't you chime in here? How do you think performance expectations have changed over the last few years? And more importantly, do 2015 numbers still hold in 2016 in terms of performance expectations?
Right. So from our experience here at Litmus 7, we are pretty much in line with what you just explained, Somak. Like people are looking forward for a less than 3 seconds response time for all of their websites. Now this looks reasonable, as there are many studies and findings by the likes of Amazon where they have experienced a 1% reduction in revenues for every 100 milliseconds increase in latency. So what we are seeing is here that the end user tolerance for slow loading pages is low, and performance expectations are high, especially during the stressful and the hurried holiday season. And one of the mistakes that we have seen is some of the clients not focusing enough time on modeling the user behavior and simulating the load expected on the sites. What this actually means is customers need to look at their user journeys, optimize the site navigation and data needs for a faster and intuitive experience. Now, the other bigger challenges are more related to the infrastructure. For example, even in developed economies, still you will find a lot of users who access the internet using low bandwidth connections. So if you want to ensure that you are providing a all-encompassing audience, the platform access, the platform actually needs to be adaptable in providing the optimal experience. Otherwise, which will also have a very negative impact on your overall revenues. Some of the aspects from a platform perspective are in ensuring that the sites can be rendered, have a very reduced page rates, ensuring optimal caching of content and faster data retrieval. So there are quite a few of things, as every year progresses, we are seeing that the expectations for faster and intuitive websites are increasing, and the expectations are keeping on growing higher and higher.
Right. Next, we turn to something about how the holiday season itself is changing. We believe that the relative importance of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, they are in flux. So let's look carefully at exactly how. So this is an interesting chart. What you see is on the y-axis is the average weekly purchase of that the US consumer does online, and x-axis is the timeline, week after week during the holiday season. So as you can see, it's not a single spike on the Thanksgiving weekend. Instead, you have a series of spikes that begins early November and lasts all the way up to the end of the year, the Christmas week and beyond. If you see if you see the one with the turkey, it's $384 that week on average. And if you see the data point on its left, you will see that the average sales a week prior to Thanksgiving was close to half during the Thanksgiving week. And the momentum continues all the way up to Christmas. So the nature of the holiday season is changing. It's the entirety of November and December, it's the entirety of the holiday season, not just a couple of spikes. Radha, does it agree with your experience?
Yes, absolutely so much. So definitely yes, holiday season is no longer just a Black Friday or a Cyber Monday event. Most retailers actually want to extend this period, which will contribute more to their revenues. For example, for a couple of our customers, 30 to 40% of the revenue to the digital channel comes during this last quarter. So for example, to highlight some of the examples of how people are making use of this entire holiday season, last year, Kmart actually posted something called as an online Black Wednesday sale event, which is basically on every Wednesday from the first week of November to the Christmas day was actually a sale day known as the Black Wednesday. Similarly, Target, what they did last year was they updated its price matching policy to include not just brick and mortar competitions, but even all the online stores for stores like Amazon, Newegg, Wayfair, and things like that, and provide an extended, holiday shopping season. Another retailer, in our case, gave free holiday reward cards, which are nothing but gift cards which the customer can apply during the promotion days, and this promotion was actually spanning across the entire half of December. So bottom line, there are many such pre and post holiday sales events specific to individual retailers and other loyalty based promotions that runs through the extended holiday period and not just the Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Now, because of all this, what does that, that we are trying to understand here? What this means here is that retailers need to ensure their IT platform, which includes their e-commerce, supply chain, OMS, CRM, everything, are optimized and geared up to handle peaks for an extended period which spans across the holiday season rather than just for a few events like, let's say, Black Friday or Cyber Monday.
Absolutely. That's our view as well. Now, we have seen the phenomenon of an extended season, not just a couple of spikes. Let's now look at the relative importance of the two important dates, Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So this is the charts that you see on screen represent data about the volume of mentions on social media. As you can see, people are talking more about Cyber Monday than Black Friday. And that also sort of agrees with the data points we have collected from outside of social media. In 2014, Cyber Monday sales exceeded $2 billion. Now, 74% of Cyber Monday shoppers say that they shopped less in stores or they shopped less in stores because they shopped online. And 39% of those who shopped on Cyber Monday said it will be their biggest shopping day of the year. So Cyber Monday is actually, in some ways, superseding Black Friday. And the next slide, what you see is a bit of sentiment analysis. So the orange bell curve that you see below the axis is negative sentiment, and the one on top is positive sentiment. And as you can see, the net sentiment around Cyber Monday is a little better than Black Friday. This probably represents a shift in attitude and a shift in consumer behavior. Right. Now, I'm absolutely cognizant of the fact that we are in the third week of October and a lot of things should have happened already. But let's do a laundry list of exactly what. To start with, you should have had an incident review of Tier 1 and Tier 2 issues already, I mean from the last year. To get into details, you should have had a root cause analysis of major incident that caused either a lost revenue opportunity or a detrimental impact to the online customer experience. What you should have looked at in detail is the response time of a problem from identification to resolution, and you should have looked for an opportunity to improve through better communication, things like decision trees and planning. Also, you should have had a thorough analysis of web metrics by now. I'm talking about things like bounce rate, conversion rates, visitor traffic, cart size, mobile usage, and so on. Also, voice of the customer report built from contact center information is something that should have happened already. Fourth on the list is analysis of infrastructure logs. Database stats, network traffic, server utilization, application logs. A thorough analysis of all of these should have happened by now already. Now, in the month of September, we believe that you should have been in the pre-production testing of key scenarios. You should have gotten together the e-business professionals and the testing team to formulate a series of tests which accurately mirror real-world customer behavior and test all aspects of site functionality. And obviously, you should have also looked at potential bottlenecks. Every e-commerce site has weak points. It could be things like personalized merchandising capabilities, on-site search, third-party integrations such as payment gateway. And these are the things that should have happened. And in October, you should ideally be at a stage where you're in the lockdown phase with the production testing all done. Radha, so what would, if something hasn't happened yet, what is that something that would really worry you?
Right. So in our experience, in fact, we are right now in the holiday season, supporting a lot of our retail customers. In our experience, what we have seen with some of our large customers whom we are working with, they do have dedicated track of projects, just focusing on the holiday readiness for every year. And basically, how does this whole thing, the project gets, executed? The team includes people from both the business and IT who do a thorough analysis of the previous year holiday season performance and define the strategies for the current year. Now, considering the size of the IT landscape that needs to support the entire retail operations, normally it is a practice within the IT team to set up a target to support 150% of above the business goals that are set for the current year. Now, why is it done so? It is just to make sure that the platform can accommodate for any unexpected spikes. Now, most of the retailers we support have right now completed the performance testing phase for all the changes that we have been doing for the holiday season readiness, and they're ready to get into the freezing period, into the freeze period. And final checks are being done for the infrastructure and network are being carried out to ensure traffic throttling strategies are in place, monitoring, tooling, alerts, third-party support are all in place. And the team is also busy completing all the team formation, the shift planning, and the rooster preparation to support the entire holiday season with the right manpower. So that is where the customers who we are working with, most of them are busy with right now.
Great. And For those of you on the call, I think you can use this schematic, and this deck is available for download post the session. I would encourage you to use this as a rough guideline, as a timeline, and it sort of serves as an approximate benchmark to help you understand where you should be at the moment. Now we get into the heart of the problem, which is performance tuning, and we start with a list of the performance tuning levers with the greatest promise. First, we'll look at caching, and obviously with the kind of demands you would expect this holiday season, caching is the way to go. There's database calls. Experts tell me that this is public enemy number one, too many database calls. There are third-party services which, when not done right, can absolutely cripple your site. It's probably too late to address design challenges, but maybe there are some tweaks you can do. But we are advocates of getting the design folks into the conversation early and getting design folks and performance engineering people together as early into the conversation as possible. Then you have hardware sizing, which is a collaborative exercise, and for this you need to take into account historical data, and also you need to work with marketing to understand the promotions planning and so on. And you have error capture and infrastructure housekeeping, and we'll look at each of these things in great detail. Right, so to start with, caching. Inappropriate caching can be a big problem. So in fact, I'm told that most performance engineering problems come down to either inappropriate caching or too many database calls. One common challenge that we see is sizing. The cache must be appropriately sized. Also, is something to ponder on is, are you using caching in the right way? We have seen cases where only the metadata is going into the cache and not the actual records. If that happens, a lot of database calls will be made, which is detrimental to performance. Also, you need to ask yourself if you're leveraging the caching capabilities of your e-commerce platform to the fullest extent. We have seen clients create a custom object purely for caching purposes. And when the object has records in the hundreds, which could be the case when say a pricing object, when the pricing is complex, the effect could be very debilitating. So you have to get caching right, and you have to use caching capabilities of your system to the fullest. When you're dealing with tens of thousands of orders per hour and you still have to render in 2 seconds, caching is your best friend. So Radha, I want to bring you in at this point.
Sure.
A couple of things. First, give us an exhaustive set of best practices. Where do you start? What do you do next? And in fact, if you were to step into a client environment at the moment, what would you look at? What would be the steps that you'll take?
Sure. So definitely, caching is an essential strategy and solution that is available with the IT people whenever they start looking at high volume, high traffic websites. And caching is very essential, but a tricky strategy as well, which has to be addressed by taking into consideration various parameters, like, for example, how the user experience should look like, what sort of data access patterns are supposed to be followed, what sort of system capacity are there. So there are quite a lot of these parameters that has to be taken into consideration before you try to say what is the right caching strategy that needs to be adopted. But as a guideline, some of the things that we follow is, one of the key principles that we have been following is what we call it as a near user caching for all the entities that is there in our site. So how do you determine what has to be as part of this near user caching strategy? So you need to identify those cacheable items that are available on your site, and you can cache them as near to the user as possible, right? So that is something which is very key. Now this also means identifying those items in the right location where you want to cache these items. For example, as the systems are spread across multiple layers and multiple subsystems and things like that. So from a caching strategy perspective, you do have opportunities to, let's say, cache certain items within the browser. Certain items can be cached on the edge. Some can be cached within the web server. You can do in-memory caching. So there are quite a lot of these levers available, but to use them judiciously is the job of the IT architects and the team to make sure what and where do they cache. Now, with caching also, there brings in a lot of challenges as well. For example, most of the websites today, you look at it, caching is not a very simple thing because a website, a pages consists of both global information as well as personalized information. So for example, if you are looking at a strategy to cache the home page, it is not easy that you can go and cache the entire home page because most of the home pages now do have a small icon on the top left or right corner, which is basically the mini shopping cart, right? And that mini shopping cart is something which is very personalized to the user who is browsing the site. So you definitely cannot cache the entire home page. But there are strategies in which you will allow you to cache the page with information that is global and retrieve the rest of the personal information using some AJAX calls and stuff like that. Now, apart from this, there is other caching strategies in terms of how much of information do you cache. Will you cache the entire entity, or you are going to cache only, let's say, certain specific properties of certain entities? For example, within Oracle Commerce, just to give an example of Oracle Commerce, when you cache entities, there are various properties available to cache the entity at different, caching layers. For example, will you be using a simple caching versus a locked caching, configuration? So these are all things which is available. And one of the key failures of the caching strategy is people not able to completely understand how to use these caching strategies and where to use it. And especially doing these wrong caching settings can actually have a negative impact rather than creating a positive impact on the site. And other key aspect that we have seen is what we call it as the service caches. Service caches are very important because nowadays e-commerce platforms are something which is actually assembled of various subsystems, third-party systems, and things like that. So it is very important you identify these third-party integrations. Try to understand where do you have the opportunity to, let's say, cache certain calls or certain information from the third-party systems, and then judiciously reach out to those systems when you have absolute need. So caching is, as I told, is a very, very complex subject, but definitely, if you do it right, that should actually help you solve, 50 to 60% of your, performance issues.
Right. So thank you for that, Radha. And at a later point in our call today, we'll get into the specifics of these individual platforms, whether Magento or Oracle Commerce or IBM WebSphere. But right now, let's go to the next item on our list, which is too many database calls. So most experts I have spoken to, they have said this is public enemy number one. Now, you must invest time in understanding the user journey, and every point question yourself whether a database call is indeed necessary. On occasions, perhaps it is not necessary to persist every bit of card data in the database. Also, you need to look at how many repricings are you doing. The best practice is probably one reprice per checkout. During heavy traffic, if you're making a reprice call with every single card update, it is inefficient and will introduce a performance lag. I'm just running through some common mistakes. Also, if you're making reprice calls, you could just recalculate the price and not make calls to shipping or tax. Now, e-commerce systems, the market-leading e-commerce systems, they take care of most of these concerns under the hood. The key is to not introduce something that disrupts that built-in optimization. So the key is to know enough about these platforms to understand the nuances and how they encapsulate and embed best practices. And the challenge is many of these problems are not apparent unless you have a high volume peak traffic kind of situation, which is of course the worst time to discover a problem like that. Radha, I'd like to bring you in again, which is tell us about a step-by-step guide to addressing this problem. Where do you start? Where do you get Google next? What are the usual the opportunities you often see for optimizing this particular problem? And what are some of the common mistakes?
Sure. So as Somak just pointed out, database is the number one culprit in most of the performance issues that we have encountered. Now we have seen quite a lot of resource contention and the database tier as one of the major contributions to the performance degradation on the e-commerce platforms. Now, the biggest of all these is the mistakes is the use of extensive database queries in the application without proper analysis of whether the queries are really needed or not. Now, long-running queries are a common problem which could have been fine-tuned by ensuring that the queries use the right indexes or having the queries split into multiple smaller queries. Also, ensuring the database infrastructure is rightly scaled is key to meeting the platform performance. That is because always you consider database as the heart of the system, and then you have to make sure that it has the right infrastructure available for the best of its performance. Other common mistakes we have seen is, in many instances, to solve a certain query slowness, people end up creating, let's say, additional indexes on the table. But what it happens is it inadvertently creates issues in some other queries. For example, if you want to tune a select query, people would have created additional indexes, which would have probably fastened the query, but somewhere it would have slowed an insert operation, because as you increase the number of indexes on a table, obviously it has to spend more time in inserting and updating the data. And one of the other key aspects that we need to take into consideration is housekeeping activities that need to be performed on the database layer. Now, what do you mean by housekeeping activities? For example, you will have a typical transaction tables, like just to give an example, the order table and order line item tables, and these can keep growing, over a period of time. For example, if you're really talking about, let's say the large transaction size, over a period of, let's say, 7 to 8 months, these tables would have been considerably grown, and this will have a lot of number of rows in that. Now, should you be continuing with that whole set of historic data while you get into the holiday season? No. So if you have a good strategy in place, you could have moved some of these transaction data into a historic table, and then made these tables a little bit more efficient in terms of querying and as well as applications. What this achieves is the transaction tables become more lighter, and all these insert update queries are much faster. So there are, again, multiple steps available to solve this database contention problem, but definitely this is one area where we have to put in a lot more emphasis as part of holiday readiness.
Right. Tell me something about the problem of too many database calls. Tell me something about the various nuances and platform-specific nuances and idiosyncrasies that you have seen. So far, is it Oracle Commerce, IBM WebSphere Commerce, Hybris, and so on? What are some of the tool-specific challenges that you see? Tool-specific challenges and common mistakes.
Right. So again, see, each of these tools, we have, its own database access frameworks in place. For example, if you look at Oracle Commerce, all the database access happens through the layer called as the repository layer. So optimizing your repository configurations with the right caching configurations, the right item descriptors, the right definitions of the item descriptors, all these things matters in terms of optimizing how your database queries are being performed, because once you configure those items in the repository, you don't have control of how the SQLs are being really generated. So understanding those finer details of what is the impact of the number of SQLs being generated with more of this item descriptor definitions and things like that is very key for ensuring a good database performance. Similarly, when you look at other platforms like, for example, Hybris, Hybris has its own way in which it actually integrates with the data tier. So each of these platforms build and come with its own data access frameworks, and having a good understanding of these things are very important for optimizing the database access. But as a general rule of thumb, the principles remain the same, as which I mentioned earlier. The principles remain the same in terms of how shorter your queries should look like, how lighter your tables should be. These are all the principles that we need to follow irrespective of whichever platform is being used.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Radha. We go to the next problem, which is dependency on third-party services. And if you don't observe certain best practices, this could really cripple your site and very detrimental to performance. So explore always if part of the request that requires the third-party data can be met in an asynchronous way, Also, you have to build a switch for third-party integrations, which can be turned off in the event of a performance degradation. Also, explore whether you need a particular third-party service for every transaction. So rather, when we were talking about this, one client had to integrate with 41st parameter, the service for fraud detection. And they questioned whether fraud detection was really necessary for low ticket value transactions. Maybe transactions that were lower than $100 in ticket size did not require a fraud detection step. So you really have to decouple your site from third-party services as much as possible. And try as much possible to meet those asynchronously, and sometimes it cannot be done. For example, if there's an address verification step, you have to do that in a synchronous fashion. But to the extent possible, build those best practices in. You have to have a switch. You have to go the asynchronous way wherever possible, and also check if 100% of your transactions really require that step. If you think about it, it's really an issue of design. And the overarching question is, what would it take for your e-commerce applications to work with a minimum of third-party services? Again, I'll bring you to the conversation, Radha. What are the common challenges that you see, and what are the best ways of dealing with these third-party services problems?
Right. So, as we all know, today's e-commerce platforms are very highly distributed with integrations to multiple third-party applications. And now what this brings in is enormous challenges to the stability and performance of the overall platform. The platform, as we know that the platform is only strong as the weakest link in the overall list of third-party applications with which it integrates. So now, how do we mitigate this scenario where a third-party system is not responding or having latency issues? And this is a common best practice that we follow, at least we follow across all of the customers we work with, and the third-party integrations that are being done onto their platform. One of the key things that we do is to ensure that we look at all third-party integrations with the possibility of a failure. Like, we always consider that there can be a failure scenario and how to recover from it in the event of a failure. So that is something which we follow as a guideline. And some of our approaches to address these issues are, what we do is we ensure all third-party applications follow an architecture where connections are created and reused by multiple clients. Because always creating connections to third-party applications sometimes becomes a very costly affair when you start doing it on the fly. Then what we also do is we always define a response time in while we actually try to integrate with the third party, which means that if we don't get a response back from the third party within a specified time frame, we actually perform a graceful exit, and an alternate user journey is defined for such exits to guide the user to a different action. Now, similarly, what we do is we also try to limit the number of connections, because we always have to make sure this is in place. It's similar to the connection pool strategy that you typically implement with databases. We always limit the number of connections that we want to actually make to a third-party system, so that in case the number of calls increases for that third-party system, we define pretty much a good strategy around what happens in that scenario where the connection gets exhausted and how to proceed from there. And these are the kind of things that we take into consideration while we look at a third-party integration. So to summarize, basically for all third parties, integrations look at with a possibility for failure, define the alternate actions in case of a failure, so that you can take the customer journey through a graceful exit.
Right. They say when you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck. So as things have become distributed, that's a really good thing. Microservices, services, all of that, but they come with challenges as well. All right. So moving on to the next performance tuning lever, which is design. So I'm mindful of the fact that we are in the third week of October, and maybe design flaws will be difficult to address at this point in time, just weeks away from D-Day. But here are some examples of what I'm talking about. We heard that one client search was configured to yield 50 products. So each product had a multitude of variants, which obviously led to a high number of SKUs. The size of the response data set was such that memory issues happened. And so the client had to change the configuration and limit the number of items displayed. Another design challenge that we have heard of, we hear of often, is too many API calls. If you're making one API call each for shipping, billing, items, card, loyalty, and if there are, say, 5 APIs called a single page, you are almost asking for performance issues. The other design flaw that we see is user behavior and behavior tracking, which is overdone and over-engineered. If you have too many session objects, it will degrade performance. Also, the best way to solve design challenges is to get performance engineering specialists in the room when those features are being conceptualized or when the user journey is being conceptualized, so that you capture flaws early and design accordingly. For example, if you have too many filters at the time of product search, it could lead to a pretty high number of database calls. So, Rana, what's your take on this? What are the common mistakes you see and how to plug them? And is this still relevant? It's October 19th now. Is this still relevant?
Right. So see, one of the observations that we have seen whenever we are being called for to look at performance issues, and when we try to deal with situations like this peak season readiness, is that the main issue finally boils down to something like a flawed design or an implementation which was done on the platform, right? So now you are left with a choice. What will we do? But now we are on the, let's say, the 3rd week of October, and now we don't have, because typically, design flaws and implementation flaws are not an easy task to fix, because these will be like, sometimes if you need to do a redesign, or sometimes if you need to do some sort of a code refactoring and all those kind of things to solve the problem. Now, in this kind of scenario, this is where we do have a challenge to now evaluate the risk of that, that particular flawed design and see how best it can be mitigated. And that's a really tough thing to say that, there is a hard and fast rule of how we want to proceed at this 11th hour. But definitely, we can see that, what sort of use cases are getting impacted by this flawed design. And then we can come up with some sort of workarounds without any large, large invasive changes, which will actually, cause a lot of issues. For example, as you rightly pointed out earlier, the whole issue that we had with search. Search, it was a faulty algorithm. The way it was being implemented was using a faulty algorithm wherein, the search results that being returned was much larger than the scope of the keywords that was being searched. So what we ended up doing is that we started looking at the algorithm. Then finally, when we ended up, doing some sort of tuning at the, the search engine layer itself, so that by making a little bit of configuration changes, we actually minimized the problem that was arising. So that was one quick fix. Similar to that in terms of using APIs, because one of the things that we have seen with all these modern e-commerce sites that we are supporting, a lot of them are composed of services, or what we call it as microservices. And when you have a microservices architecture, there is always a trade-off. That means that how exactly these microservices are being used. For example, for one of our customers that we are working with, to render the home page, it was using around 20 different microservices for various different purposes. This is where we had to make a call like should we be combining some of the services and make it a single call, or should we be having keep the same as it is but change the way in which the pages are being rendered. And now in this case, what we ended up is like, we kept the services as it is, but we then made a little bit of page rendering pattern adjustments, so that we ended up calling the APIs that I needed to, form the above the fold content, and the pages get rendered first, and simultaneously the below the fold content generation happens. So this is how we try to, analyze the problem and solve that in case of this APIs. But definitely, as I told, solving design issues or implementation issues in the 3rd week of October is really a tough one.
Right. Right. By the way, a note to the audience, reminder to the audience, the panel that you see on the right, we are rapidly approaching Q&A time. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them down on the panel to your right as we speak. and we'll be taking questions shortly. So the next thing is flawed hardware sizing, and this is really as much a business problem as it's a technical problem, because you're trying to estimate demand, and everything is predicated on that assumption and on that estimation exercise. So you need to really explore if the old thumb rule, the ratio between steady state and peak demand, which you had last year or the year before, if this still hold. And so you take industry best practices into account. Research is key here. What is also key is collaborating with your friends in marketing and elsewhere, because what really happens on those 2 days of peak demand, Cyber Monday and Black Friday, particularly Cyber Monday, is that you are looking at the audience you are attracting at that point comprises a lot of deal hunters, and it is easily that kind of traffic. The traffic on that particular day is heavily influenced by email, as you can see from this chart. We looked at data from 15 retailers, and we found that 77% of hard goods purchases followed some web marketing influence. And email marketing continues to be the strongest tool for reaching busy shoppers during key dates. So these promotional dates tend to attract deal hunters, and they're very open to email messages. So you have to really be in sync with what your friends in e-business and marketing are doing, because you need that to build the demand estimate, to build the traffic estimate. What's your take on this, Radha? What are some of the best practices when it comes to hardware sizing?
Right. So, right sizing of hardware is very essential to deliver an optimum performance for your e-commerce platform, especially during your peak holiday season. And there are many kinds of issues that we have seen. One of our customers had issues with the application because of the hardware flaw. In this case, the application was running on a below par system due to due to various hardware issues, and the application throughput was drastically reduced and was forced to move into a different hardware, which performed well. So what this essentially means is that it is not that the application was having the problem; it was basically the hardware on which the application was running, it was not the right one. So right hardware, again, hardware sizing doesn't mean that you need to get the highest specification servers. It should be that it is rightly sized based on the desired output. In one of the other instances, actually the customer heard was this was very interesting, because this was an issue with respect to the load balancers they were using, because they had a load balancer where a lot of calls to the internal systems was also being routed through the same load balancer, which actually caused unavailability of sockets to serve the entire traffic. Now, what this meant was ensuring all the traffic was analyzed for the network optimization, and then finally ensuring that adequate optimizations are being made. So as you can see, we started talking about things like caching, database, and design flows. But now we have ended up in coming to a layer of even at the infrastructure layer, where we see that what sort of readiness should be in place to meet this peak holiday demand. And another thing which I wanted to highlight here was the same concept, same things that we talked about marketing. Why marketing? The team has to work with the marketing team is very critical from a hardware sizing perspective, is because a lot of planned holiday season marketing efforts will end up in a great heavy traffic spikes. Now, that basically means that we need to know what sort of traffic spikes are expected, so that we right size the hardware infrastructure, and then we will make sure that we have been planned for those traffic spikes. Now, with great marketing campaigns, this can bring in all the required traffic, but the site infrastructure needs to be sized in a well manner so that it can handle that traffic. So definitely a key area that all teams should focus upon.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to skip certain slides because we're sort of running out of time. Now, so far we have focused on the application server layer and the software infrastructure layer, databases and so on, and the e-commerce framework itself, because that's where most of the sophisticated clients are. Those are the performance tuning levers that are still available to them. But there are a lot of optimizations you can do at the front end, which maybe in some cases have not been done yet, at least to the fullest extent. And so we kept this for the last. And so a series of best practices, which are possibly quick wins, which can yield a lot of benefits when done right, and you don't have to get into the intricacies of your e-commerce systems or your architecture or your design to get those benefits. So here are a few things. One is optimize the heck out of the front end and focus on the two metrics that most closely reflect user experience: time to first render, time to first interaction. Degrade dynamic capabilities, we'll get into that in a second. Ask yourself whether you are using your content delivery network to the maximum, and of course establish a free feedback loop as quickly as possible. Now we'll get to the most low-hanging fruit of all, which is the front end. Now we have heard at Forrester, we've heard from vendors and users alike that up to 80% of performance issues sit with the front end, and should be the primary target for optimization if you haven't done this already. In fact, one front-end optimization product leader told us that if you get the best practices right, you can deliver 20 to 40% page load improvement and a 5x or 6x improvement in time to first render. So the few good best practices are: you focus on above-the-fold content and get to a quicker time to first interaction. Once the content above the fold loads, the rest of the page content, ads, scripts should continue to load in an asynchronous fashion. Loading such prioritization, loading prioritization is especially important when you have grid-like information, such as a search result with hundreds of products. You can also, if you want to take it a step beyond, you can prefetch, which is predicting what content or page you will access next, and download that behind the scenes. The other thing that we see people doing wrong all the time is image bloat. People have said that images in the e-commerce context need to go on a diet. You can compress code, of course, but it will save a few bytes. But if images often make up 50% of page weight, if you can do that with resizing, compression techniques, and so on, it will significantly reduce time to first render and time to first interaction. Rather, I know that most of your work is with some of the most sophisticated e-commerce providers in the world who probably did this years ago. But do you see this? Is this still relevant to at least some of your clients, and what are the best practices here?
Right. So definitely front-end optimization, as we mentioned, is a very low-hanging fruit, but if addressed well, is a very key initiative that can be taken up as part of holiday readiness to improve site performance. And there are many strategies, best practices available to address this. And I don't think I will be able to cover everything that is there in the in this short period of time. But just to highlight a couple of ones which definitely needs to be taken care. Things like, for example, cleanup and compression of all the front-end assets being served, which can be of a great improvement. Reducing the number of HTTP calls and DNS lookups that happen when a typically page is being rendered. Ensuring the image compression, that is another great thing. And using front-end acceleration solutions. There are now the market has quite a lot of front-end acceleration solutions. Definitely every e-commerce site should start looking at it. Ensuring the cache headers are correctly set for the assets so that it gets effectively uses the browser caches. But then one of the other key things that is happening in the modern websites is modern websites depend on a lot of third-party JavaScripts, which probably is being hosted on the third-party site. Now, ensuring that those JavaScripts are always available is very key. So, bringing in a dependency of a third-party JavaScript on your site, you have to be very careful, thinking of what will happen in case of, let's say, some sort of an issue. The other major issue that we have seen is with resolving the browser compatibility issues. Because many times, some of the performance issues that we see might be related to certain version of, let's say, for example, a Firefox 40 is experiencing much slower page than users on other browsers. So identifying the key areas where these kind of front-end optimizations can be done and applying some of these strategies can bring a long way towards ensuring a good site performance.
Absolutely. So I get to the next few bullets. pretty quickly because we're running out of time and want to have time left for Q&A. So you have to consider whether you want to have all the dynamic capabilities all the time. Search site personalization tools like automated product recommendations, offer targeting, dynamic pages are all great, and your A/B testing might tell you that they do push up conversion rates and they do push up average order value. But these tools, while sophisticated, are very difficult to cache and sometimes impossible to cache, and they require server-side processing. So you need to look at a trade-off. The upside that it provides in terms of boosting up your conversion rates and order values, is that worth the performance degradation you might face? So you might need to take a look at that as well. What's your take on that, Radha? Do you see people making the trade-off?
Yes, I definitely see a lot of these sites that we are working upon actually, disable some of these dynamic capabilities, because the whole focus here is around, a faster and hassle-free, purchase process. And this is something that we have seen in some of our very large customer sites, so that, they make sure that the site is performing well rather than all the bells and whistles capabilities that is out there.
Right. Right. Got it. I think got it. So I would skip a few because we are getting questions and it's getting late. Radha, so let me ask you, everything that we have discussed so far, how does it change for mobility? What are some of the mobile-specific challenges and opportunities that you see?
Right. Now, as far as e-commerce is concerned, definitely mobile channel is something which none can ignore, okay? And as per the latest statistics, it shows that the number of users transacting over the mobile has surpassed the ones that are using, desktop browsers. So retailers actually adopt multiple strategies to support their multiple channel using, let's say, things like, for example, a native mobile app and or, mobile optimized sites. Now, coming specifically into mobile optimized sites, retailers have multiple approaches to building those sites. Some follow a responsive site design approach, while others do have a dedicated mobile optimized sites. There are pros and cons of both of these approaches, but generally what we have seen is that responsive sites adds a bit to the performance, to the performance issues. This is because of the fact that responsive site code includes support for even the desktop site as well, which sometimes gets in the way of processing the mobile site. And there are quite a few nuances that need to be considered while designing mobile sites. And just to highlight some of them are, like, for example, using the client-side libraries. And the client-side libraries, you need to be very careful in terms of what you use, how lightweight they are, and things like that. Even the choice that you make between, let's say, jQuery versus JavaScript. So you need to be very careful about what you're trying to use. Then prioritizing the loading size and the speed of the content that is above the fold. You always know that customers are impatient, so when they click on something, the page needs to be rendered. So you should not be having a strategy where you generate the entire page and then push it to the customer. You should actually have the above the fold page rendered first, and then the rest of the loading can happen. Then having optimized images, very key for mobile. Then the other thing that we have seen is, streamlining all the fonts and actions using techniques like, for example, image sprites, etc. So then similarly, the content optimization based on the desired breakpoints, because as you know, the devices are small, so it may not need, let's say, all the content that you typically use to display on a larger website. So definitely mobile, yes, we cannot ignore it, but it's actually also challenging to make sure that you provide the best and the optimal mobile experience.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I'll shift to Q&A for a minute to one question, and it's a pretty interesting one from an audience member. The question is for you, Radha, and it goes like this. What kind of promotion do you suggest on Cyber Monday, and how would a wrong promotion set up in the application impact performance on the site?
Well, see, from this is more than a technology question. This is more of a business question, because promotions are something which is being driven by the business, right? In terms of what sort of promotions need to be set up and what sort of that's basically a completely a what you call a business thing. But what we can do from a technology perspective is that once we do have a fair understanding of the various types of promotions that is being planned, this is where we had that earlier discussion point of working closely with the marketing department, right? So we definitely will know with these kind of promotions what sort of volumes and traffic can be expected and how that can impact the overall performance of the site. So I would really say that we need to have a good dry run of these promotions well in advance as part of your performance testing for the peak season readiness, and that should be the way we should try to address what sort of promotion should be supported, or even things like, for example, when you have such let's say very global promotions, would you be sending the promotion mailer to your entire registered user base, or do you have strategies like, for example, you will stagger your emails so that you give a little bit of a leeway between the batches of emails so that you can manage your traffic, because typically people tend to click on the offer and do the transaction the moment they see it, right? So you don't want everybody to simultaneously come on the site and then cause a traffic issue. So you will stagger your marketing mails and then try to address that particular point that was being discussed.
Right. My answer to the first part of the question, which is our data tells you, and if you can mail me the question, my contact details are at the end of this slide. I'm happy to send you research if I get your email address. Email still works great when I'm talking about channels here, preferred channels here, when it comes to Cyber Monday promotions. Search engine marketing works well as well, but not as well as email does. And interestingly, social media marketing doesn't work all that well. Great. So we'll move to the next question, which is, and this is a slightly interesting one. What are some of the strategies to manage situations where the traffic is growing more than what is anticipated? Rather, you must have run into something like this in your
right. So this is basically a good question, because this is the crux of the problem that we are trying to solve with the holiday readiness, right? So one of the widely adopted approach to address the scenario of unanticipated traffic spike is to ensure that you have a robust site throttling strategy and solution in place, because that's the most proven technique which can be used to address this unexpected or unanticipated traffic problem. And we have seen customers adopt multiple approaches, either using a market solution like, for example, the Akamai SPA, which is called the shopper prioritization application, or having a custom throttling solution in place. Now, what essentially a solution like Akamai SPA ensures is that the traffic on the site is always within the threshold that is defined. So it can, the moment it tries to cross that threshold, that traffic will be redirected to a specific hold area. Okay, and once that particular site has room for accommodating additional traffic, the users will be allowed to come in. So bottom line, threshold throttling is what we typically need to figure out how we do it for addressing the unanticipated traffic problems.
Right. I think we have already passed the half an hour mark, the 1 hour mark. We'll take one more question, which is, and this is again a pretty interesting one rather. What are some of the best practices around content publishing during peak traffic?
Okay, so content publishing specifically, content publishing is first of all, this needs to be understood very well. Content publishing is a very resource-intensive process, because in many cases, what this involves is that a content that needs to be published needs to be extracted out of some staging area and then published onto the live site. Followed with, it's not only just putting into the live site, but you might need to refresh all your caches so that the old content goes out and the new content gets into the system. Now, especially during holiday seasons, you don't want the valuable resources to be performing these sort of highly resource intensive publishing tasks. Okay, so a better approach would be to, what you need to do is that as part of your holiday readiness, what you need to do is to have all your content a timestamp, a timestamp created on them, which will specify what is the activation period for each of these contents, and then publish the same publish all that content well in advance. So now when the content comes into the live site, you will have all the content sitting in the live site with some sort of a timestamp which says that when this should be active. And this approach will ensure that when the content will get activated only during the period that which it is supposed to be, and does not cause any of the overheads in typically publishing the content. Because what we have to also understand is that this whole holiday readiness is something which is pre-planned. So you would have planned for all your content, what sort of banners you should have, what sort of product information you should have, and everything well in advance. So you can bring all those things and park it within the system, but make sure it is timestamped with an activation date and it gets activated during that particular date.
Got it. Great. So thank you for your questions, audience members. And I think it's time to summarize and bring this evening to a close. So some of the things that we keep hearing, the recurring theme from our clients is, first, real user monitoring is the way to go. Number two, if you haven't already, focus on the front end. There are amazing benefits to be reaped there, a lot of low-hanging fruits. And when it comes to things deeper down the stack, caching and database calls tend to account for most of the issues. And the fourth point, and I cannot stress on this enough, a lot of this actually comes down to having the right people on your team who truly understand these e-commerce packages. A lot of the best practices are built in, they're encapsulated. The job essentially is to fully utilize those capabilities and not to do something which introduces an error inadvertently and a misuse of these capabilities. What's your take, Radha? How do you summarize today's discussion on the performance tuning problem?
Well, I think we have covered a lot of these points well in detail. So definitely monitoring is something which has to be in place to solve all your it's not like solving. First of all, you need to identify the problem so that you can have an effective way of addressing those. And other important thing is about looking at some of these areas that we discussed, like things like, for example, front end. And we know that it's a very, very low hanging fruit, but there has to be some sort of a focus put in analyzing the entire your channels, both as mobile as well as desktop, and try to optimize the maximum out of it. And I would say there are a lot of industry standard tools available in the market today which can simulate for various scenarios. Things like, for example, you can do simulation of browsers, you can do actual browser testing, various different kind of things. But definitely that is something which we need to take into consideration. And also we talked about having the right teams. That is where a team like Litmus, which has been doing this since last 5 or 6 years, in terms of supporting some of the large e-commerce platforms, can bring in the value and expertise and help retailers achieve this goal of being holiday ready.
Great, and I think I would like to wish the audience all the very best for the next couple of months. And our contact information is on this slide, and I think we'll follow this up with a link to the deck. And we would love to hear from you, and let's continue the conversation, and email us, call us, and we are happy to take questions. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining, for tuning in today. And thanks a lot, Radha, for your time and your insights. So great to work with Litmus 7 on this, and thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was very great. I think we are good for now. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being with you today. As mentioned, our contact details are there. Please don't hesitate to write to us in case of any questions, queries you have, and we will be more than happy to respond to you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Radha, and thanks a lot, everybody, for joining.